Welcome to the Sent from Disneyland podcast.
Here age relives fond memories of the past.
If it's your first time joining us, welcome. On this episode, we'll take a journey into the past and explore Disneyland and Disneyland history with mementos, snapshots, and postcards sent from Disneyland from 1955 to the present. Today, I'm starting off by thanking my patrons from patreon.com. You can join and receive mail from my desk or from my Disneyland trips. Special thanks to Random Olive, the first patron to this podcast, and to the e-ticket patrons Tania, Eric Daniels, Joe Gamble, Scott Booker, Monica Seitz Vega, Russ Romano, Michael and Christina Cross, Scott Cagle, and Sheila Harry. C-ticket patrons Serious Inquiries Only, Debbie Weinstein, Jennifer Schneep, Grace Coate, Ben and Noel Bruning, Patty Wolin, Angela Reynolds, and Aaron Moran. B-ticket patrons The Disney Rewind Podcast, Jeff and Paige Orton, and Joshua, and Exorable Tosh Bell. And the A-ticket patrons, Elise Sharp, Zealot Infinity, Alexis Robles, Maggie and Henry Byers, Angel DeBlois, and the All Aboard podcast. You can also sign up for my new newsletter for a chance to get some postcards delivered by the USPS to your mailbox. I am your host, your post-host Clocky, and today we have 2 postcards sent from Disneyland. The front of our first postcard has the Mark Twain sitting at the dock in Frontierland. In front of it, you can see the Bertha May keelboat. In the background, you can see the Matterhorn, Sleeping Beauty Castle, the Plaza Inn, the Moonliner, and even the loading area for the pack mules. On the back it reads, Mark Twain, Frontierland. In Frontierland, you can journey down the rivers of America aboard a 105-foot Mississippi stern-wheel steamboat for a glimpse of Mark Twain's America. Disneyland's replica of the Swiss Matterhorn, Sleeping Beauty's castle, and the TWA rocket ship can be seen in the background. It's not postmarked and was sent in an envelope, but based on the age of the card, we'll assume they visited the park on Labor Day, Monday, September 2nd, 1963, when park hours were from 9 a.m. to midnight. The weather was a high of 80 and a low of 62. Park attendance that day was 23,397. It's addressed to Elaine. It reads, Dear Elaine, we've been on every ride in the park, including this one. See you soon, so practice. J. Darius. We're putting this in an envelope, so you'll have a new stamp. I chose this Mark Twain postcard because I was flipping through the early editions of the e-ticket magazine and found a detailed article about the history of the Mark Twain steamboat. Going as far back as the 1953 Herb Ryman concept drawing of the park, or even the 1954 Ellenshaw drawing, you can see a depiction of 2 white paddle wheel boats either docking in a frontier town or cruising around an island on the left side of the park. It's interesting to note that Ryman's drawing has the boats going in the opposite direction the Mark Twain navigates the river today. The 3 Imagineers who worked on the Mark Twain included Roger Brogy, Dick Bagley, and Roland Peterson. The 2 riverboats that they based the Mark Twain from were 1850s Mississippi riverboats, the Little Rufus, and the Natchez. Looking at images of both boats, the Mark Twain has the shape of the Natchez, but has the open-air look on each deck like the Little Rufus. The hull or base of the ship was built in San Pedro at the Todd shipyards. It was trucked to Disneyland at night and had to be brought up and over the berm, which had already been built around the park. The other levels of the boat were built in Burbank, on one of the sound stages at the Disney studio. Each part of the Mark Twain was made to historically specific standards, using oak for the spokes and bracing, with Douglas fir for the paddles. The gingerbread trim, the banisters, and the railing details of the boat were crafted in the wood shop on Main Street. Before Disneyland opened, and for some years after, the Main Street Opera House was the lumber mill and workshop for the park. The Mark Twain was also tested for wind resistance and can handle gale storm conditions, which was almost tested recently with a tropical storm. Great news! Enfield Post is back up on Etsy. Grabbing some vintage stamps is a great way to plus your mail, whether you're trying to match the color of your postcard or envelope, or adding a themed stamp to the back of your mail. Be sure to check out Enfield Post. You can head over to enfieldpost.com and explore all the different vintage stamps you can use on your next card or letter. That's ENFIELDPOST on Instagram and enfieldpost.com for your wedding and vintage postage needs. Enfield Post is the official postage stamp sponsor of the Sent from Disneyland podcast. The The front of our next postcard has a Mark Twain coming down the rivers of America. In the foreground, you can see guests walking on the Barrel Bridge on Tom Sawyer Island. On the back it reads, "The Rivers of America. Life is much as it was a century ago along the rivers of America. You can cruise aboard frontier vessels like the Sternwheeler Mark Twain and explore Tom Sawyer Island with a floating barrel bridge." It's postmarked August 24th, 1978, with a Los Angeles Always Use Zip Codes Cancel and a 6-cent Eisenhower postage stamp, Scott number 1393. I assume they visited the park on Wednesday, August 23rd, 1978, when park hours were from 8 a.m. to 1 a.m. The weather was a high of 80 and a low of 59. It's addressed to Mr. Donald Bielke of San Francisco, California. It reads, "The weekend at Tahoe was great. Really appreciate the way the cabin and all you did for us when you were in San Francisco. It's been a heaven trip. Love and hugs, Jay. We really had a fantastic time. Everything you did was fabulous. We spent the whole day in Disneyland heaven. LA is a great big freeway. Put 100 down and buy a car, etc. XXXOOOA." While in motion, the Mark Twain is tethered to an underwater rail. Though on a rail, the steamboat has a system that allows it to have a natural motion while navigating the river. A combination of wheels and caissons allow for the movement to look like the rudder's natural action. The Mark Twain is powered by steam. You may notice on the bottom deck there is a caged area where a cast member, the engineer of the boat, controls a large metal lever known as a Johnson bar, which allows the piston to move the paddle wheel either forward or in reverse. In the cage, the engineer also controls the throttle valve, which regulates the speed of the riverboat. The captain, at the top of the boat, is mostly communicating with the engineer about the traffic of the river, like canoes, rafts, or the Columbia. Like a steam train, the Mark Twain does need to relieve pressure from the broiler. For the Disneyland Railroad, this usually occurs at the New Orleans Square station, but the Mark Twain releases its pressure directly down into the river. The 3 decks accessible by guests include the main deck, the promenade deck, and the top level known as the Texas deck. The main deck level is where guests board the boat and can enjoy a water-level view of the river. The next level, the promenade deck, has been used for serving mint juleps, and there is a small stage between the back stairways known to host jazz musicians. The top level is called the Texas deck because travelers on riverboats in the Rio Grande would stay on the top deck for a better view of the North Shore and Texas. The Texas deck also allows access to the captain's quarters and the wheelhouse. The wheelhouse has an unobstructed view of the river, and although the captain doesn't steer the boat, the wheelhouse will give signals, bells and whistles during navigation and docking of the Mark Twain. Before the park opened, Imagineer Joe Fowler was doing a final inspection before Walt and Lillian's 30th wedding anniversary. Lillian was also on the ship and said it was filthy, and the two of them, Mrs. Walt Disney and a former Navy admiral, swept the sawdust for the first guest to experience the attraction. The attraction opened with the park on July 17, 1955, and Irene Dunn, the star of the movie Showboat, christened the ship with a bottle filled with water from different American rivers. This incoming postcard is sponsored by the Art Throwdown. Art Throwdown, or ATD, is an online craft hour on Instagram, starting at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 Pacific. Be sure to check out Monday's ATD, which is usually hosted by paper artist Russ Romano. I've seen many amazing art projects, learned about awesome postmarks, postage stamp history, and a lot more on different episodes. It's great to stop in for an hour to watch someone craft or design something unique. Each host brings something a little different to each show. I'll list some of the regular hosts, or you can follow Russ Romano 2021 on Instagram. The front of my incoming postcard has an illustration of a woman in a red dress taking a photo of a rattlesnake while her husband looks in surprise with his hat flying off and a rabbit hiding behind him. "Look, dearie, at the friendly little snake. He's wagging his tail at me." It's postmarked August 17, 2023 with the Los Angeles Cancel and an Elkhorn Coral Forever postcard postage stamp, Scott number 5363. It reads, "Purchased from the Chirico Summit Coffee Shop. Sent from LA because I never remember stamps on road trips. Jamie." Thank you so much for the postcard, Jamie. I try to remember to bring enough stamps when I travel, but sometimes I run out. Luckily, during my last trip, my hotel was near a post office, and I was able to run and grab some international stamps. Be sure to follow Jamie on Instagram at Jamal Fox. She's sending out some Halloween mail from the park starting now through October. Thanks for listening to Sent from Disneyland. If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe and tell your friends. It would be helpful to share your favorite episode to a friend or on social media. There are over 200 to choose from. It would also help to leave a 5-star rating and comment on whatever podcast platform you use. If you would like to support the show financially, please check out our Patreon page at patreon.com/SentFromDisneyland. You can find me on Instagram and Facebook at Sent From Disneyland, or on Twitter at Sent From Disney. For questions and comments, send me a postcard addressed to Sent From Disneyland, P.O. Box 44, Hood, California, 95639. This podcast is not affiliated with Disney, the United States Postal Service, or any post office or Disney properties. Opinions expressed on this podcast belong to its host and guests of the Sent From Disneyland podcast.